Hello again. Another week, another getting nowhere.
Getting nowhere. I thought we were going nowhere.
Oh, going. Oh my God, I'm
We're getting
just
nowhere with us.
getting nowhere today. But
Mm.
going nowhere. Our podcast, just me and you this time. No guests. Um, Back for another episode. And today I wanted to talk to you about the existential crisis iceberg. This
Ooh,
was
go on.
something I watched from a video of Alex O'Connor about this meme that has been circulating on social media platforms,
Mm.
TikTok and Facebook. And this came from a post of a user on Reddit, actually. User under the name Cosfix, I think. And I don't know if you've seen any iceberg memes before.
No, although I don't spend a lot of time on social media except YouTube.
Okay. This usually, there's a lot of variations of these iceberg memes. It's kind of how
Oh,
there's different
yeah. Iceberg. Oh, so
layers.
not the essential iceberg, just general icebergs. Like,
Yeah,
this
general
is the
iceberg.
real problem. This is the visible problem, but actually the real problem is below the water.
Precisely. There's all this kind of memes, and you can have whatever you want in its layer. So I'm gonna share my screen with you to show you what I'm talking about. I've actually gotten the photo of the existential iceberg. So we're here, the tip of the iceberg,
Yeah. So
and
what's the stuff just floating in the sky? Is that relevant to the top?
this part.
Yeah, everyone has their own complex life
This
and
is the
worry about
beginning.
the future.
So this is the beginning of the iceberg. This is the beginning
Mhm.
of our worries, of the existential crisis.
Okay, so all
And
worries stem from here.
well, yeah, that this I think this is talking about the concept of sonder that I wanted to talk to you about before.
Sonder or sunder.
Sonder, Sonder.
Okay.
Concept of sonder was coined by John Koenig, I think, in his book Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows,
Right. Okay.
where he talks about this concept of everyone effectively having their own complex lives with complex interactions, friendships, loves, fears. And in this complex life that everyone is living, you might be just a side character or even just a background character somewhere in a train station or something like that.
Yeah.
And in on its face, it sounds like obviously everyone knows everyone has their own lives, but if you kind of really sit with it and you kind of ponder the um, the implications of this and how each one of us really has such a complex existence, and we're not just the main character at all, really, because everyone thinks they're the main character, then
Mm.
it kind of makes you start questioning your existence and yourself. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that yourself.
Questioning your existence or in a bad way or a good way, or it could be both.
Well, it could be in a good or a bad way, or thinking that um, that you're not just important, I suppose, or that you don't matter as such.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we can sort of view two ways. Like we can view from our perspective outwards, or we can use our imagination to view from outwards inwards and sort of see the totality in that we're in some ways we're very small in terms of society or in terms of the universe or whatever you want to, or in terms of nature. So but then in a way we are quite, I don't know, like as much as far as anyone else is living a main character life, we've got that within our fingertips as much as perhaps anyone in the universe. As humans, like we have a potential to live lives which would perhaps be as close to maximal meaning, but
Mm.
like it's not, doesn't mean that we're all living that way. But like if we imagine what a meaningful life is, it looks like that some humans would be able to have that within their fingertips. Um, yeah, like if you watch any movie, a lot of the stuff that happens to the characters, if it's meaningful, is stuff that we could experience as well.
Mm. To me, I get that feeling when I'm like in a busy train station in London sometimes, when if you sit there for half an hour, you kind of see thousands and thousands of people just walking by you, going at different directions, meeting different people, talking to some, laughing, everything is happening, and you kind of think, oh, there's so many people and so many things are happening at the same time, so many different um, lives are unfolding at the same time,
Mm.
and you're just in the background of all these people. You're
And that's
just
just in one station in London, where there's thousands of stations in the world all looking the same, and
precisely.
that's just for stations. So yeah, like it gets to that stage where it's just too big to imagine, but that doesn't mean
Exactly.
it's not good to try and wrap your head around the unwrappable. Or, like, is it's I guess in some ways it's some sort of spiritual experience in some ways to
Mm,
be able to really comprehend how small we are. And so some of those videos of zooming out from Earth to the solar system and to the galaxy and then beyond, and just like we are just
mm,
so tiny on the material scale. But yeah,
mm.
I guess obviously like we're the center of the universe in terms of consciousness as far as we know. Like it's likely aliens exist, but so far we haven't found them.
Well,
So
wait. Don't go too far. We're going to talk about this later on in the
what, we got
in.
aliens coming up, have we?
Well, no, not exactly aliens, but let's. We're going to talk about more existential questions further down about whether we're other.
Okay, let's get back to the iceberg.
Yeah. So back to the iceberg. In the second line at the top here, we have the worrying about the future, and I think on its face, I think it's just thinking that obviously that the future is unpredictable. We cannot be certain about it, and as I think it talks about how I think as a child, you don't really worry about the future
Mm,
because you just live much more in the present. You don't worry about what's going to happen or if there's going to be problems or if something is happening. You just think about now, and you're usually happy in the moment. But I think the more we age, I certainly see it with myself. I'm more, I think, about potential problems and about the future and about what might happen more than anything else.
mm.
And that, I think, causes a lot of anxiety for people because you keep worrying about things that have never happened that but might happen. So I suppose that's why it's at the top of the existential crisis iceberg.
Yeah. So why is one? What's the difference or relation between the text on the left and text on the right?
I don't think there's any different. I think they're just both meant to be at the very top of the existential crisis iceberg. As anything at the top is not as heavy, apparently, in this kind of
All right. So we're
scenario.
starting off with the unheavy stuff, whereas
We,
worry
we,
about the
we,
future, you think that is getting heavy.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the person who made that, the person who made that, this is how they arranged this, the different concepts,
Right.
and they put those two at the top.
Right.
I don't think it's about comparing those concepts as such with each other, but more comparing them with how heavy others are underneath them.
Oh, really? So let's think
So
a bit more to the next level then.
let's go to the next level. So we have, let's go down here, and we have the um, simulation theory. I think that is self-explanatory. Whether we live in a simulation or not, I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of people that do believe that we actually live in a simulation, and I think it's much harder to prove that we're not rather than that we are.
Interesting.
And obviously, if we live in a simulation, then I believe that it would make a lot of people rethink their existence and think that the world isn't the real world, I suppose.
I guess if we live
Uh,
in the simulation theory, then the only potentially valid occupation is philosopher. In terms of you're really nothing really matters until you figure out exactly whether the person who created the simulation is benign or not, and whether the simulation is benign or not. Um, and then yeah, you just I guess if you can't get out of it, then you just enjoy what's in it and try not to let the stuff that is in it worry you too much. But yeah, I'm not convinced by the simulation theory, but that might be because I don't want to be. But yeah,
I think people are also arguing that on the debate about simulation theory that at some point we will probably have good enough technology to create our own simulated worlds.
Yeah.
far enough in the future, and therefore, if we can do that, then it is statistically more likely that we are one of those simulated worlds than the real base reality.
Yes, I see that argument. I've heard that argument before. But it's also, if you look at it perhaps another way, you could
Mm,
sort of imagine maybe in 50 years, maybe say 50% of people believe we're in a simulation, and
mm,
that's up. So, like, probably 100 years ago, no one believed we're in a simulation. So that makes you sort of think that perhaps there's been some sort of, like, it could be for good reason that people are using logic for it, but also it could be that people are just, it's like a malaise of the masses that people are starting to believe that we're in a simulation, perhaps because of mental health problems. And actually, that could be quite a dangerous spot for the world. Like, imagine if 50% of people were
mm.
believing we're in a simulation and we weren't.
That'd be so bad.
Like in a way, if you look at the world in terms of just raw, like phenomenologically of what we really experience day to day, and if we just get back to what's there, then that just seems on the face of it very weird. Like, obviously you could make something philosophically make sense, but that wouldn't be weird. But yeah, just on the face of it, it seems weird. Yeah, like that could be weird,
It could be weird, and it
and it could
also could
happen.
be self-destructive as well. Because then, if people are thinking, I think the problem with that train of thought is that if we think that we're in a simulation, people would feel much more hopeless, that everything is meaningless and nothing really is important in that way. I suppose
Mm.
if everything is a simulation.
You could argue we're already living in some sort of simulation in terms of how society is set up to as like a simulation, which is like an augmented reality simulation. So the reality, you could argue, is still there, like nature and human beings and whatever are still there, but there's been an augmented reality, like a system which has been, it perhaps is invisible, but it's been imposed on us. So in terms of the money
Mm.
system, is one that you
Mm.
could argue is that. Not to
Or
say,
even our virtual presence these days creates a
yeah,
virtual
yeah,
reality.
yeah.
Our
That's another good
presence in social
example.
media and different apps and everything, it creates a digital version of us that is only virtual.
Yeah. Mm.
But I don't know. That's just, again, we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We're getting stuck at each point, but interesting. Yeah.
but that's
Well,
why I wanted to discuss it with you.
yeah. Okay. So simulation
Um,
theory. So it's not only going down the iceberg, but you start on the left and then you're meant to read right. So you start with
um,
simulation theory. Then why does anything exist?
I'm just going through. Yes, I'm just going through it just like that. I don't know which side you're meant to read. I'm just going through it from left to right.
Okay. Well,
But
let's
I
go with
don't
that.
think. But I think anything that is at the same level of the existential crisis iceberg here, they're all apparently, according to the author, which have the same kind of weight. But
Mm.
that is open to interpretation, obviously.
Why
I
does
don't think
anything
everything has the
exist?
same weight in every level. But
Okay.
let's go on. Why does anything exist? That I
Yeah.
think is that is obviously the $1 million
Yeah.
question, isn't
That's
it?
what that gets me every so often, and then it seems to leave me more in awe than anything. It's just like it. Obviously, it's the ultimate question. It's like the
Mm,
question of questions, because
mm,
without that, then no other question could be asked. But we sort of ignore it, and it's just so weird that either, like, however we got here,
mm,
even the scientific explanation is mind-boggling. Like, it's just, to really comprehend it, you have to really. It's like the Earth. It's like the video zooming out from the Earth and seeing how big
mm.
space is. It's just one of those questions where it's just, wow, like, how are we here? And it just feels like so normal, and there's just so much just normal stuff. Like it, like, and even like mundane stuff makes it feel like, oh, it's just a normal world, but and it is, but it's
But
also, how did it get here? Like,
it's
if you really think
incomprehensible,
about it,
really, and I
yeah.
think it's incomprehensible because even if you think in terms of centuries or millenniums, I think our brain is not able to kind of comprehend
Mm,
the scale of years that the universe has. And for our mind, I think it's almost incomprehensible to think, 1 billion years ago. What does that even mean? It means
Mm,
nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Or even, you know, um, smaller amounts of time that are closer to our lifespan. I don't
mm,
think that our brain is able to kind of comprehend them. But I think it's um, it's a little bit what Alan Watts says in a way, that it's either we can think of it as that we are just a fluke in a way,
mm,
based on the fully automatic model of the universe, that everything has just a set of rules that as you hit play, they just all the complex interactions of the laws of nature and physics led to the formation of stars and planets and everything else in between, and then we kind of popped out and then natural selection, and we're kind of
mm.
here, and it's either just a fluke that we're here, or you can think that we were created, so there's a creator, and we have the ceramic model of the universe where we were created and therefore we have a purpose because we've been created.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Both on the face of it seem quite unlikely. Like just in terms of, yeah, like they just, I don't know, when you really think about it, and like if you were like, if you didn't get told anything by anyone, you just grew up on your own.
mm,
Like, what would you think? Like, it's only because we got science to really go in depth and sort of put some sort of detailed explanation to explain a lot of it, but not all of it by any means. And then we got the religions which come up with theories of why and how we were created. But if you had no, if you grew up on your own, you'd be I don't know where you what your answers to that would be. Like, what would be your best answer?
that's a tricky question. I don't know how I would think of it, but I like to think that um, if you think about how the world is, um, even if you go down to the molecular level and you think about intermolecular forces and things like that, if one of these kind of fundamental forces of nature was even slightly different, there'd be no
Mm.
universe, there'd be nothing,
Yeah,
effectively.
no, I'm yeah, like I don't know what to think about religion. And I think if you can just leave religion to the side for a bit
Mm,
and just sort of think, like, take that example of, yeah, like the fine tuning of the universe, it does
mm,
seem like wow. But and I think that's one of the strongest arguments for religion, and that's always like just going through religion, the
mm,
class at school. You'll learn like certain arguments for God. One's for the
mm.
first cause argument, ontological argument. So we sort of done that, but also yeah, the fine tuning of just there's
Exactly
that.
that.
But then on the other side, which I think a lot more people would be just yeah, let's go into the God camp here or something equivalent to God, Tao or whatever, but some sort of intelligence which designs stuff. And then on the other side, you've got the arguments against God, and the
Mm,
biggest one of those is the argument of suffering. It seems like this
mm,
creator, if we have a creator,
mm.
doesn't care,
Yeah.
or it, and that doesn't mean the creator doesn't care. It just means it seems like he doesn't.
Mm,
I'm saying he just for ease of conversation, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's why it's for me as well. It's just really weird to square those two things because
mm.
it does seem like legitimately amazing when we study the universe of like that this is actually here and in such fine proportions and yeah I
I
but
think
then
on that argument of suffering, I
mm,
think people would argue that suffering serves a purpose because it serves to help us grow or learn something from it. But wait,
mm,
the difference is, why do animals have to suffer?
yeah I was going to bring that up if you
Animals,
didn't.
yeah, because there's no intelligent reasoning that you could give to you know uh, a deer getting caught in a tree in the forest in the middle of nowhere and slowly dying and losing its power until it has an excruciating death and gets eaten alive. There's no, you know it just seems like senseless suffering there, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I was listening to a talk by someone whose she's a palliative care nurse, and she's
Mm,
religious. She's actually not a nurse. She's a chaplain. So she is religious, but she's not a nurse. I meant to say she's a chaplain. So she comes and sees dying people, and then she also her two parents have died, and one of them died in COVID.
mm,
And someone said to her as her mother was dying, "Oh, God's got a reason. God's got a purpose for this." And
mm,
she said in the talk, "I've still not seen any purpose." And I think that's the realism of people who are like religious in a way which isn't just blinding them. It's honestly religious because it's not an easy faith. It's
mm,
something which is just like, yeah, I haven't figured out why this would be, but I still believe that there is something there. Yeah, I think this makes perhaps a lot of people swing into the camp of dualism, sort of seeing that there is perhaps a good creator or a good
mm.
God and a malign or someone as a force which is not so good as well. But that's
But
also
people
got
would
problems.
argue that it's highly it's if it's unlikely that there is an all evil god, it's just unlikely that there would be just an all good god either.
Well, there's a line in the Bible which says something a lot along the lines of, um, yeah, like I do all the bad stuff and I do all the good stuff,
Hmm.
which is a very awkward line in terms of what a lot of people would like to believe. But it's interesting that line is there, and the
Mm.
fear of God, um, which the Old Testament probably captures very well, is yeah, is a legitimate thing which perhaps should be considered. But obviously that can create theological problems as well.
Mm. Well, anyway, after having this, I think we have a lot more to cover.
Yeah, we're not going very far down this
Ru-
iceberg.
that's why I'm rushing you on because there's a lot to cover in this
Okay.
iceberg.
Are we going to get more
Um,
depressed as we go on?
it's not as depressing. I think I like it. I like some
Okay.
of the deeper concepts.
So we're going
Uh,
down, but
but
also
no,
not down
y-
psychologically.
yes, like some of the concepts can be more liberating, I think, than others.
So is the
Uh,
idea that the existential crisis could be bad, but also it could be the start of some sort of awakening?
yeah, I would like to think so
Okay.
because I
Well,
don't think
let's go on then.
I think crisis. The word crisis has always a negative connotation to it, and I
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
think that
I like the phrase a breakdown can lead to a breakthrough, something like that.
yeah, something like that. Because I think that if you have a crisis, you can have, as you said, an awakening. You can have a new understanding. You can have through crisis comes peace, maybe.
Mm. Yeah, it does seem like
Um,
suffering. Like obviously, you would never want to have suffering wished upon you, but often, if you look back on your life, and sometimes the suffering is has helped you in some way, or has the potential to be helpful.
yeah.
It makes us more empathetic for one thing.
Hmm. So let's continue to the next category.
Acknowledgement of death.
Acknowledgement of death. You still have a happy little chap here, by the way.
Yeah, he's a positive thinker.
I don't know if he's, yeah, I don't know if he's happy that he's acknowledging death,
What
but
was the one at the top? What's
the one at
the
the top is a
oh, he's
super
super
happy
happy.
chap.
Okay,
Yeah.
so slightly
So
less happy.
yeah,
Acknowledgement of death.
he's still worrying about the future, but he's still happy.
Okay, so it's a bit of a
Um,
fake smile,
maybe,
maybe.
but this one is starting to lose his smile. He's
Okay,
acknowledging death now,
he seems pretty chill though.
and I think that on its surface, I think again, all people know that we're all going to die at some point. I think
Oh,
this is
yeah, that's
again,
another
if you
thing though we don't want to acknowledge. It's another stark reality of life. Like these are all like stark realities of life that we like to sweep under the carpet so we can keep moving.
exactly that, no one really sits with it and kind of ponders these sort of questions because they're
Yeah,
really, really hard to digest and
but a
kind
lot of
of
meditations and contemplations, like the Christians, that is it Palm Tuesday? You'll be told ashes to ashes, and you're
mm,
going to go back to ashes. So,
mm,
um, yeah, but just a lot of people don't tend to think about death too much, at least in the West. Mm.
I definitely agree because we don't really want to think about it, and we don't really want to think about the true finality, and no one wants to visualize what it actually means that you won't exist, you won't be here completely, and anything you are and related to you not only will disappear but will ultimately be forgotten as well.
Yeah, well, I was reading Marcus Aurelius earlier this week, and he was talking about that even if you become super famous
Mm,
and everyone remembers you and
mm,
passes you on, then eventually all those people will die. And eventually all the
mm.
people that pass your memory to them, they will die.
Yeah.
And if you subscribe to the theory of the heat death of the universe, then everyone eventually dies. So that sort of like if you know that eventually probably you will get forgotten,
Mm,
then that can reframe your thinking, because I think so much of human achievement comes out of wanting to be to live to be immortal in some ways,
mm,
in terms to have a mark, to make a mark, and
mm.
to but that can also cause lots of problems, I think.
Yeah, and I mean this also comes from ancient Greece as well. It was everyone who was great or wanted to be great wanted to ensure that they will be remembered after death, because they believed that as long as you're remembered after death, you'll have a good afterlife and you'll still
Mm.
exist. And all the big heroes and stuff would hope that they'd go to the underworld and they'll see the other known and famous people that are still remembered down there. So I think there is this fear, as you say, of being completely forgotten, and I think that comes with the acknowledgement of death. And I think a lot of people see it. If you're going through it, you'd probably start despairing at the fact that you'll die and everything you did will be relevant, and
Mm.
everyone who remembers you will not remember you at one point. But at the same time, you can also think that yes, life is limited, and therefore it's this is why it has meaning, and therefore
Mm.
that's why it's important, and it has an intrinsic value because it's not permanent. One without the other wouldn't mean anything. In reality, life without death wouldn't mean anything, and vice versa, death without life, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. There seems to be something enriching about death which helps life, and I'm not sure I've quite got it, but it's there is probably a reason why so many of these religious and philosophical traditions contemplate death so much, not in a way of glorifying it, but
Mm,
actually just to be try and be aware of it, to try and form an awareness of what is likely to be the case when we
mm,
die. At least as far as we know, our body will rot and we will turn into dust, and that everyone who remembered us will eventually uh,
mm.
not live, and yeah, will eventually get forgotten. However, like whatever way we get forgotten, we will get forgotten. So
Precisely. So, after going through the acknowledgement of death and being upset about that, let's go even deeper.
getting fun.
And we go to sympathy is created by self pity.
Okay.
So, I think with that, I suppose it's self-explanatory that in the way I suppose any kind of feelings that we have of self-sympathy, of not sympathy, of self-sympathy, of just sympathy, um, is I suppose a mechanism to kind of um, self-serve ourselves, maybe.
Right. So sympathy. So this is not like a positive thing. That sympathy, like being sympathetic to others, is created by our own feeling sad for ourselves. Like if we couldn't feel sad for ourselves when we couldn't feel sad for other people, is this the idea, or do you think it's something different?
I think it's more like to say that um, we we extend sympathy as a way to shield ourselves, maybe, um, of from other as like as a defense mechanism, I would say, of caring for ourselves more than anything and protecting ourselves.
So are you suggesting that sympathy is not actually something which is a nice trait in the way it's just comes from selfishness?
In a way, I would think. I think that's what it's trying to say. So it's not a true, genuine caring of others, but a way to either serve your interests or get something out of being of showing sympathy to others and surviving. Because if you weren't sympathetic, if let's say how when we started forming communities, if you weren't very sympathetic of others, then they might be angry at you and kick you out because you don't care for the community and anyone else.
Mhm.
And if you get kicked out, you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, yeah, it's an interesting question to raise whether sympathy is actually like selfish or selfless.
Yeah, but I don't know. I couldn't. On the surface of it, I don't know how to interpret it as such.
Perhaps if we go on to the next ones, we can get maybe some idea of what they're going with for that.
The next one we have last Thursdayism. Have you heard about this? I hadn't actually heard about that
No,
until I
never heard
actually
of it.
listened to Alex O'Connor talking about it, and then I kind of understood it after he talked about it. So it's a theory that talks about the concept that the universe and everything in it, including us, our thoughts, our experiences, was created last Thursday.
Okay, go on.
Uh,
Sounds like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm not sure it is, but it sounds like that sort of comedical, like absurdism.
I think it's like exactly. I think it's like it's like an absurd kind of um, idea of like a thought experiment that there's no way for us to prove that um, our reality hasn't started before last Thursday, I suppose.
Mm.
Because in that theory, all of our memories and experiences could have been implanted last Thursday, and we think that there is a time before that, but there's nothing really. I don't know what
Yeah,
would be the purpose of this and why are we thinking about it. It's just an absurd
yeah,
idea.
it's possible that like we like to think that everything in the universe traces back to the Big Bang or a single point or God, but it is possible that it just started at a random snapshot in history,
In time, yes. And
especially if it was a simulation, like a game could have
yeah, I
just
think
been
of it.
started halfway through the CD or
Yeah.
whatever analogy you want to give. But then you still have to explain who created the CD, who created the game, and like when did that? And then you just have the same question of did that come from a universe, and therefore where's the start of that universe? So that's the next question we really want the answer to.
Hmm. I think it's just as a thought experiment more than anything. As you say, it's more maybe related to a simulation that the simulation could have
Hmm.
started
Yeah, I think
last
a lot of it.
Thursday, and someone pressed play, and we're just here, and we think that we've been through the game, but um,
Yeah.
the game just started last Thursday. I don't know. It's just a thought experiment
Well,
that can
in a
make.
way, like it brings to life the fact that our memories are just thoughts.
Yeah, and I
That's
suppose.
the idea that a lot of spiritual guys want to get across is literally, guys, all the stuff you worry about in your past, in a way, is just thoughts. That's the only trace that
Mm,
is still there. Like it's not going to happen again. It's just now occurring in memory, and the shifting of that memory can free us to live better lives going forwards.
mm. And moving on from last
Moving on.
Thursdays, because I don't have any more comments on that. Um, I think that kind of ties with the next one a little bit, maybe. You're
Mm.
alone in your brain, and the guy has lost his smile now. He's
Oh,
fully lost his smile. He's quite unhappy.
is
And
he
even
getting
his
more? He's
hair.
getting more hair. Yeah, I was thinking
Yeah, I don't know if his hair. I think it's
messier
more
hair
like
as
that his
well.
hair is starting to stand up by what he's experiencing.
Ah, okay.
More than getting more hair. I think it's just more like that he is getting matted hair more than anything.
All right, he's just lost in his philosophizing and not able to actually
Yeah,
live and comb his hair.
and I think it's almost ties a little bit with what you said that the thoughts are just our thoughts, and um, you are alone in your brain. Kind of ties in with that everything that we call experience is just a construct of our brain in a way. Um,
Only our brain, or is this suggesting that there? Is this suggesting that we are the only like I, for instance, I'm the only individual in the universe, or
I, I I
you
don't think it's
and
going that far. I just think it's just trying to kind of emphasize the fact that we're just um, that our reality is constructed by our brain, and therefore um, you're just y- you're just a brain inside the skull that just experiences reality and translates inputs, maybe.
Well,
Um,
that seems true, but what's the like
I,
is
I,
scientifically that's the case that things come in from the
y-
outside and
y-
we filter them through our thoughts and perception, and
yeah,
they
and I think that's the thing, and I think that this is not therefore the objective reality because it's so heavily filtered by your brain. I would think.
mm, yeah, there's a lot of consciousness research into consciousness and the philosophy of consciousness, which does make you think that yeah, like it like the reality we experience is not necessarily as we
E-
experience it. Like really
Exactly,
good
because
science
if
as
we
well.
use
Like,
all of the sensory, exactly, because we're using all the sensory inputs, as you said, that are translated in the brain. What if our brain is translating it wrong, or what if our
mm,
brain? Obviously, we have a shared understanding of reality because we all more or less experience it in the same way. But what if all of our brains were wired wrong, and our 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 version of reality isn't the true reality?
yeah, well, it's definitely not the true reality, but whether trying to it's a good reflection of what the true reality is, that's another question.
Hmm.
Like, but yeah, I don't think
And
there's any doubt that even our own perspective, for me to stand here or sit here and you to sit there, that gives two different perspectives. So there's two different realities in that sense, but they are all hopefully perspectives on the same reality, and we are hopefully forming a good vision of what that reality actually is. But a lot of consciousness researchers would suggest actually our vision of stuff is quite flawed. Um,
hmm.
but it doesn't mean it doesn't reflect anything. But it could be that at the extreme, it doesn't reflect anything. What reality is really like.
Hmm. Well, I think that is why it's a bit deeper in the iceberg because it can again make you a bit more unsettled that nothing that we experience might be objectively true because it's so heavily filtered by our sensory devices, eyes, ears, nervous system, and then our brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we are still in the same row,
Oh, we haven't
but
got through all of these. Okay,
we haven't gone through all of these in this row. So we're not alone is the next one.
that seems to contradict the previous one.
I think we're not alone. Probably would point out what you said about alien life, and if that alien life existed, that would be very contrary to, for example, the experience that Christian religions, for example, tell us that we are unique, we're
Right. So
created.
yeah, it would break
Uh,
down a lot of assumptions that we might have.
yeah, that would be a heavy blow, I think, for um,
Yeah, we're, like Christianity
the
abandoned the idea that we're the center of the universe after I guess Galileo, but
but I think that
but
would
they can still
undermine it
hold
if
the idea that we are still the center of the universe in terms of complex life slash consciousness. But that's
yeah,
how it's
and
on
we're
the earth.
unique exactly that we're
We're
uniquely
unique.
made by God. I
Yeah,
think that would crumble if suddenly aliens popped out of the sky and they said hello.
yeah,
You weren't specially created.
yeah. But I think it
uh,
would be pretty awe-inspiring as well. I think religion would probably just adapt, rightly or wrongly.
hmm,
Like Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author, had a great quote which said something along the lines of either we're the only like advanced life in the universe, or we're not, and both possibilities are equally
hmm.
terrifying.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
And it's
I'd
like
really love for yeah.
there
Good
you
though.
go.
I would love for the aliens to come down. To be honest, visitors style scenario.
Mm.
And they said
But the
hello.
fact that they haven't already suggests that they may never do in the lifespan of the Earth and perhaps the lifespan of
It
humanity.
is a
It,
little bit worrying.
like
Yes.
what I'm sure there's a law, someone's law, which says if something hasn't happened yet, then it's
I
unlikely to
watched
happen.
I watched the video at some point that was talking about how galaxies, as the Big Bang expands, galaxies form their own galaxy clusters, and they all move at the same rate. And at some point, those clusters will move far enough from each other that it will be virtually impossible to travel between galaxy clusters effectively.
Mm.
So there'll be no way, even if someone lived in one galaxy cluster, to kind of reach our galaxy cluster, for example.
Well, yeah,
And,
it's a bit of a brain melt thought to think that like we like the scientific assumption is, and maybe it comes from a religious assumption, but the scientific assumption is that we will eventually be able to find out whether there is, we'll be able to find an answer to this question whether we're alone in the universe or not. But I
mm,
think you have to think of the other side of it. It's actually quite likely we will never find out.
that's
Like,
that's
that's quite creepy as well.
and I think, yeah, one way or another, it would be an upsetting thought.
Like a lot of
Um,
people suggest that maybe we're not the only universe, and I don't know if that's useful to think about, but you could think of the space is so big that you might as well treat in your imagination, you might as well treat the other universes, if you imagine lots of universes, as just the other galaxies, because it's
mm,
just so big space that would probably come closer to really getting your head around what is actually there.
maybe, maybe, and I think one way or another, whether we are alone or not alone, it is a pretty existentially um, difficult thought in a way if you sit down with it. So I suppose that's why it's deeper in the iceberg.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next one.
Mm.
Afterlife skepticism. I
Getting
think
all
that is
political bits.
more for the religious people more than anything.
Maybe, but
Again.
I think there's people who would class themselves as perhaps not particularly religious, but they have like some sort of experience, or someone has some experience, some mystical experience or near-death experience, which makes them think that maybe there is something. Like I'm in that camp. Is that I'm actually like I don't want to die at all because I think there might be no afterlife, but I'm
Mm.
pretty curious as well. Like I hope I can retain some of that curiosity when I'm anxious about in my final dying moments. I hope my curiosity can power me through, so at least I'm not suffering too much.
Well, the thing is, though, that if there's, I think people, when they think of afterlife, they think of it as, paradise or heaven or any kind of similar place, like a physical realm of some kind. And if you think about it, if even if there was that perpetually heaven-like place, it would still be boring. I
Mm.
think. In If you think about that for eternity, living in there,
What if
it's almost like that TV series called The Good Place.
I have
Um,
seen the trailer for it?
I've watched the series, and they think they're in. Well, I'm not going to spoil it, but they think they're in the good. I'm going to spoil it actually,
Okay,
because they
spoiler
they.
alert.
They think they're in the good place, but they're technically not in the good place. They're in hell, effectively.
Oh, really?
And effectively they're being tortured while thinking they're in heaven.
Interesting.
But towards the end of the series, they're able to live the life as they want, to be in heaven, effectively.
Could you use that as an analogy for our own life at TV shows? We think we're in heaven and we're
Mm,
actually in hell, or actually maybe we think we're in hell, but actually we're in heaven. And like, because you talk of paradise, paradise is meant to be a place on earth, at least in the biblical
mm,
idea. If the Genesis lists the four rivers, and they're rivers on earth. So what if we're just messing up paradise in terms of actually we've got everything for a meaningful life here. If you list everything, if you ask ChatGPT, for instance,
mm,
what would possibly make a meaningful life, like what's the most meaningful life, it will list some factors, and they're all factors that we can have as humans
mm,
on Earth within our reach. They're not like some mystical factor, like maybe having loving, intimate relationships, being able to be curious and learn about the universe, being able to have these amazing experiences, maybe mystical experiences, but also like experiences of nature.
mm,
Just all of these things are. And being able to build stuff and make it, it's not too hard or not too easy, so you get that flow experience. So lots of factors. Anyway, you could search ChatGPT like what would make a meaningful life, and get some maybe objective idea of what that might be. Because first, to answer the question whether life has meaning, you have to have an idea of what a meaningful life would be. So yeah, what if this is paradise technically, and we're mucking it up?
maybe it is, but in the show, they're able to live in heaven in the end, effectively. And they live for millions of years there, based on our metric scale. Towards the end, they're able to do what they want, live the lives they want, do a million things, effectively living thousands of lifetimes. But in the end, they're given the option to go through a gate and effectively become one with the universe,
Okay.
to completely lose their form as
Mm.
such. And all of them in the end, after millions of years and millions of years, in the show they use a different metric for years. It's an incalculable amount of time. They all in the end chose one after another to go through that gate,
Mm.
and because they had lived all they want to do. So I think a concept of afterlife only makes sense when you think about our life here and the material world as such. It doesn't make sense when you think about it as eternity, because we're not able to think about eternity or conceptualize it.
Yeah, I think eternity might be more like how you mentioned the people in a good place. They choose to go through the door to oneness,
Yes,
and
that
therefore
is it.
perhaps lose their identity as an individual, and then also um, lose memories. Perhaps I don't know.
Yeah, all of it is implied, I think, in the end. So that's what I found interesting, and that's why I think it can be part of the existential crisis iceberg here, where the afterlife criticism comes from, for a lot of people to think that,
Mhm.
afterlife might not be what we think
Yeah, I
of
guess
it
a lot of people
as
don't really think too much
traditionally.
about what the afterlife would be because, in a way, it is stupid to try and wrap our heads around something which we just have no
Mm.
idea of. But then, if you think about what it possibly could be in terms of like what are you actually kind of hoping for there, then it, as you said, it might actually feel like a pretty meaningless existence, and it, at least under many people's imaginations of what is the afterlife, and therefore is there an afterlife, um, and yeah, is yeah, it's just interesting thought experiments. Probably quite fruitless, but anyway,
Mm. Oh, but interesting, nonetheless.
yeah,
So going deeper now to
okay.
the existential
Oh, we've hit nihilism.
um, iceberg crisis, we have nihilism now.
Okay,
And
and
nihilism is self-explanatory, I think, in a way.
so everything is pointless
Everything is
for
pointless.
Luke.
Nothing matters. Nothing is important or has any meaning or purpose. Is effectively nihilism. And
Mm.
I suppose there is two sides of the coin here, where some people can say, "Oh, great, nothing matters, therefore good, can do anything I want,"
Yeah,
or
we're three big brothers off us. We got not got a future to worry about in terms of having to preserve a perfect future. Let's just
exactly,
or not get punished in the future.
exactly, live the good life now, or
Mm.
think nothing matters and be sad and be down about it.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it depends on my emotional and mental state. Sometimes I feel quite nihilistic, and sometimes I feel in nihilistic in a negative sense. Let me say.
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably quite common these days, and has been for 150 years at least, and
Yes.
growing more and more so. Probably, I think nihilism is probably not going to go away, although people might cover it up with getting excited about political change and yeah.
Mm, yes. I
Which
mean,
political change is often a false promise, at least in the past, how things have changed, and often there's just a new problem that comes along, caused by the
mm,
problem caused by the same people often who fix the last problem.
yeah, and political change doesn't necessarily mean change at an individual level for a lot of people either,
Yeah,
which I suppose doesn't fix the problem of nihilism as such for a lot of people. Or they might think that it will, but I don't think in practice it does.
yeah,
But as I said, this is fairly standard for most people, so I don't think we can say much more about nihilism instead. But the interesting part is going to the next one is that we are alone instead. What we were
okay. So
talking earlier. So
as no aliens.
this is yes, this is that we are truly alone in contrast to the "you're not alone," which was just above it.
Mm.
We have "we are alone" instead, and it's feathered down for some reason. If you think about it,
So that's
uh,
more freaky, as Arthur C. Clarke, I guess, hinted at. But actually, that might be the freakiest option, but the option that we know we have the evidence for so
mm,
far, that as far as we know, we are alone. That's the scary option, and that in terms of actually like we could be the center of a universe in terms of complexity and consciousness and ability to love, and we're just on a tiny, tiny little rock which could get blown up
that's what
theoretically
I'm
anytime.
saying. And thinking that we're so isolated and that the universe is dead on such a massive scale, and we're the only thing alive with our meaning of life as such, it is quite disturbing.
But it
You
also
think if you put
potentially
the
gives us,
vastness of universe in perspective.
it also potentially gives us value.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, we are kind of quite special then, if that is the case.
Yeah, like in
Um,
terms of if you think that maybe the universe is a meaning creating machine or a complexity creating machine or more and more advanced consciousness, then we might be the pinnacle of that as far as we know we are. And that like if life had developed 1 billion years later, because I think is we 4 billion years old, something like that, three or 4 billion.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so if it had developed just one, and life hasn't been around that long, so
Mm,
a lot of those billions of years were just nothing really happening,
mm,
at least whereas life was concerned. And so if life had waited another billion years, then it would have not been hospitable conditions, and therefore
mm,
life would never have developed, and then this Earth would just have got warmer and warmer again and died. So yeah, we're in the Goldilocks zone there in terms of
Goldilocks zone. Yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say.
able to develop complex life. And we're in an interesting role as humans of, especially in this age of history, of having the potential to destroy the earth or to propagate human life outside of the earth, and therefore create like a backup in terms of if earth gets destroyed for whatever reason, or the backup gets destroyed, at least we had two, and therefore two is a lot less likely statistically to get destroyed.
Hmm. Well, I think it's not too bad if you think that we're special, if we're alone and special. But
Mm.
if at the same time something happens, then that's it. As you
But
said, if something
that
happens to
could view
Earth,
maybe some sort of purpose, though. So that sort of counters with nihilism, that
mm,
we actually might have some sort of graspable purpose in terms of distributing life outside of the Earth as a backup. But yeah, I guess still you could still ask the question of if is life actually worth saving.
mm,
So the nihilist, I think, often has at some point they can come back with.
yeah. Well, again, I don't know if I feel that this is worse than the previous one, that we are alone,
Mm.
or we're not alone, but that's up for debate, I suppose. Going to the next one, being born before immortality. I think that really ties, and again, before
It's
I
getting,
move on,
it's looking more
our
like a
guy has
philosopher.
really been degenerating
Yeah.
from the matted hair to longer hair now, and a beard,
Is
maybe
he
a
turning
goatee.
into Karl Marx? Is it?
I,
I'm trying to think
maybe,
who looks like
but
that.
he's getting darker. He's dimming here,
Mm.
and he's really unhappy because he's realized that being born before immortality would really suck, I suppose. And
Being
it
born
kind of
before humans develop the science to create immortality.
effectively what we were saying about Brian Johnson in the previous discussion not
Yeah,
long
how a lot of
ago.
rich people
If
want to extend their life another 10, 20 years because it might just be another 10, 20 years that allows them to get to a state where we can preserve consciousness or at least make the body immortal.
precisely that, and we talked about it, if anyone hasn't watched it, in our episode about Brian Johnson's documentary Live Forever, so you can go and watch our conversation about that if you haven't.
Nice plug.
um, um
Nice plug.
yes. And I think that that really sucks if you really think about it. That you're
Yeah.
being that we
But it,
might have been born
but it
before
also
immortality.
creates another reason for purpose. And we talked about on the Brian Johnson episode, like, in a way, he's got quite a real type of religion in terms of the live forever salvation by actually just trying to live a bit longer. And therefore, potentially, you've got the real promise that science
Mm.
may allow you to live forever. Now, there's all sorts of problems for that. But it's an interesting idea which actually could give you some sort of real purpose.
It could, but I also think that
It motivates you. It would motivate you if you really knew that we have a cure for immortality coming in the next 100 years, which I think is not beyond the realms of possibility. I'd say it's at
mm,
least 20%.
mm,
There, that's enough to aim for with a lot of motivation if you really think that's what matters in terms of, yeah, living for longer and maybe living in a better world. Who knows?
maybe. But at the same time, I don't know if we can really talk about true immortality because, as you said
Mm.
earlier, at some point, millions of years from now, billions of years from now, the universe will die eventually.
Yeah, I
And
think
we'll
a
have the
lot of
heat death of the universe, which doesn't. But I mean, in our minds, technically living for a million years would be immortality in
yeah,
some
yeah.
form.
As you say, with a good place, like eventually people would just choose to go and rest in oneness or whatever you want to call it.
Mm,
But I think a lot of people would like to have as much time as they choose and here and be able to choose death as an option they choose.
mm. Yeah, that's probably true. I would be really upset if I if this happens and I have died right before it happens.
Also, as Terence McKenna talks about, like time is sort of like accelerating, not in terms of real time, but in terms of the number of things happening in a set
Advancements
time
and
block. Like if you look at the last 50 years, with the amount of evolution in terms of technology, that's just going to keep going up, maybe exponentially, but it's probably going to keep going up. And as long as we don't blow ourselves up, and so if you extend your lifespan even by another 100 years,
mm,
then you're going to be able to at least experience what's going to happen. And it's like, in terms of whether it might give you purpose or incentive to try and live longer, just because you don't want to be the guy who watches half of this really gripping TV drama
mm.
and can't see the other half because they die in between.
Can't see the next seasons if you
They
die.
can't see the next season. And like, it could be a horror show, it could be a comedy, could be whatever, but it's probably going to be pretty interesting the
Mm,
next 100 years and 100 years after that. So you don't want to miss out, folks.
for sure. Sometimes I think about the same. I would really not want to die in the middle of watching my favorite shows before they finish.
Yeah, I thought about that in the past. Like, some old people have a like
Clinging
maybe
on.
they're just clinging on
Yeah,
for the
one more
next
year
season.
until the next season comes out.
Like, how much does EastEnders
Yeah.
extend lifespan? We want to know what happens to this character.
I'm really curious. Like, if it was, for example, like in the middle of Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or something like that, I'd be clinging tooth and nail to survive, even if I was
Mm.
terminal, to make sure I watch the ending. But in the Game of Thrones, I'd be like, I would have better off be gone. But Breaking Bad had an amazing ending.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But as you said, going back earlier, like Marcus Aurelius, everything has perhaps an unhappy ending in terms of matter, because the only thing with matter is change, and change is suffering if you are attached to any aspect of it.
hmm,
So Game of Thrones would be no fun if there wasn't regularly a big character dying, and that
I
was part of the
suppose,
problem. That
yeah,
was part of the
the
problem.
finality of it, yeah.
That was part of the problem in the final season. Is like just less and less
They
people
killed their own
were
characters.
dying. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
they did eventually kill a lot of people, but still, like, I think they could have killed more.
Yeah,
That's
maybe.
what was such a attraction with the first few seasons, is you never knew who was going to survive. Um, so, but yeah, going back to the point, and like, it seems like people like Brian Johnson and Elon Musk, they get some sort of purpose by thinking, "Oh, let's extend consciousness to another planet," or "Let's live longer so we'll be able to become immortal." But then you still got the question of whether life is has some inherent value,
Hmm.
which is perhaps the ultimate question to be asking. And I think I think it does, but perhaps not in a way that we can really grip our heads around. I think we have to experience it.
Mm. I
I
think
think
that's a part of the previous part about why does anything exist in a way. I think that kind of ties back to that in a bit.
mm,
So again, more existential questions, I suppose. But let's delve deeper into the next.
is this the last level? Are we at the
N-
bottom?
No, we have more levels. We're not
Oh,
at
oh
the. We're
wow.
not at. We're not at the bottom.
Interesting. Okay. Oh,
The
we've gone an
next.
hour on this. We've been doing this for an hour and we haven't even got to the final
We
level.
haven't even got to the final level. We have at least 2 or 3 levels, I think, more.
3 levels. I was thinking max 2. Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
We have to wrap through these a bit.
Yeah. So, dual consciousness theory. Have you heard about this?
Two consciousnesses theory? I don't know. I haven't heard about it.
Well, I kind of had a little bit of an idea before I watched Alex O'Connor's video about it, and it's effectively the cases where they there is patients that suffer from epilepsy
Yeah.
or some other um, conditions where they get an operation uh, where they separate the two hemispheres of the brain and they sever the corpus callosum, which is the part of the brain that connects the two hemispheres and
Yeah.
allows seamless communication. And there's been documented cases where these people start having some very interesting side effects after the separation of the two brain hemispheres, where they'll have their hand start moving on its own and doing stuff, or even preventing them from doing stuff, or fighting them in cases.
Right. Okay.
And they hypothesized based on that there might be a kind of less dominant second consciousness in one hemisphere than the other, which isn't in control and it's in a way more subconscious to the other one. And when the brain hemispheres get separated, that other consciousness is able to not be as silent anymore because it can control that one limb from that side and kind of do its own things. We kind of poses the question whether there is something secondary inside us
Mm.
that is silent and mute and is not able to kind of communicate, and therefore it's almost like locked in.
Yeah. No, I think
And
on some level that's obviously true. Like in terms of our shadow, if you talk about it in terms of psychological terms, is like we do seem to have a like some people think of it in terms of the Greek gods. Like
mm,
some
like
people can sort of believe in a Christian God, but also have the idea that actually the Greek gods were perhaps a rudimentary way of explaining the different personalities inside of us. That we're not just one personality; we've got many different facets, maybe of the same personality, or maybe we are like a amalgam of many different personalities. Um, I don't know, but it does seem to be in some aspect that we are a collection of many different aspects of or personalities, and these personalities don't always get on, and therefore you could have part of you wanting to eat as much chocolate as you want, and then some other part of you making you feel guilty for that. Um,
I,
and
th-
you've
I,
already
th-
got lots of examples of this push and pull in your
I
life.
suppose, but I don't think it's so pronounced as you're describing it. I think in these cases they want to underline the fact that there might be a full-on version of you that is kind of trapped inside and cannot even. It might be able to hint you towards a path, let's say, but for the most part is silent and wanting to come out.
Yeah. Well,
Which I think.
I think that's the shadow, which we term as a bad thing. And shadow's
Mm,
not really a thing. It's just a name for something we don't understand. So we call it the shadow, and we see it as creating perhaps bad things in our life, or creating conflict, or making life not easy, making maybe calling us to do what we should be doing. But it could be that the shadow is that side of us that's deeper, that maybe our soul, or Carl Jung called it the anima, at least for men, and animus for women. So I don't know if you've watched or read His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, where children
Yes, I've
all
watched the
adults,
movie,
the
the
Golden
Golden
Compass.
Compass.
Yeah,
Yes.
so they have so all the people, at least in the universe, the main universe of that book, they all have a animal which is a symbol of their soul, effectively,
Mm,
and they can communicate with it. But it's just like a pet animal which walks around with you all the time. And if you separate by distance or by cutting in a certain way with a certain material, the soul or the animal from the human, then it creates death for both of them.
I
So
found that really fascinating, that concept, and I really like that
mm,
that story. And as you said, maybe that is effectively a projection of this kind of duality inside us.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like the idea in that story is when they go into our own universe, the characters from that universe, they go into our universe where obviously we don't have the like our anima outside of us,
mm,
but they assume they work out that actually we've got an anima inside of us, so that when they go to the other world, then people like us could theoretically see our anima as
mm.
as a real thing and maybe be able to form some more relationship with it because we see it as a real thing. But yeah, like obviously it doesn't seem like that's the fiction. That's a fictional story, but it does seem like that resonates with us because there is something true, and we might call it the soul or whatever. And yeah, I think that's behind a lot of fiction is that idea of the soul, and yeah, it's whether that's a different personality than us, a deeper personality than our waking day ego, maybe.
I think that is why it's deeper into the existential crisis.
Yeah.
Um, Iceberg here, but
Mm.
I don't know how I feel. I think it's quite a worrying. I like that you are able to spin it positively each time.
I think
To
there's
be
always
honest
a
with you,
positive spin.
you're
And
always able.
trouble is, there's probably always a negative spin as well.
You've been able to always so far. You've been able to make them mostly positive, and I'm
Mm.
impressed. I always see it as the creepy side, or the worrying side, or the unsettling side
Interesting.
of these lines.
Yeah, I always think there's a very good argument for nearly every like philosophical idea, and also a argument against it as well. And I'm not
If it,
sure.
yeah, if my brain
I'm
was
not sure what's
split,
right.
I'll keep my hand tied. I think at all times behind my
There's a-
back, so it doesn't attack me at my slip. But anyway, let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
Observation creates the universe. I think
Okay.
this is the classic. If a tree falls in a forest,
Mm.
has it? Is there going to be any sound?
Yeah. Mm.
Um, and I
Like when
think
you first
obviously,
hear that in philosophy class, you're like, yeah, obviously it makes a sound. But when you think about it more, you're not so sure.
yeah, there's no one to hear the sound. Is there any sound?
Yeah.
Um,
Like that only in a way comes up in consciousness when someone eventually goes and sees that tree fallen down and they've maybe seen it 5 days earlier and it was standing up, and so they assume what happened in the middle. But if everything is in consciousness, then
they see, yeah, but they say that this happens because there's still an observer.
what the tree you're saying that the tree can only fall down because there is an observer even though we're not here.
I think this is, yes, in theory at least. I think people that believe that observation creates the universe say, as far as I understood it when I was looking into it, that even if you're not observing it, for example, the tree falling, the tree would still fall because there is an external observer, which would
Observing
be,
everything,
yes, God.
which you might say is God. Yeah, interesting. So you could say
Yes.
it's God slash some sort of consciousness overseeing everything, and that's maybe the argument against animism, which might be the idea, which not necessarily the idea, but maybe the idea that nature is the consciousness. So maybe there's the consciousness, and then there's nature, which is conscious of the stuff, and then the observer. And that might go back to our previous one of the previous things on the iceberg is why there is the problem of suffering as well as the problem of fine tuning is maybe the consciousness was fine tuned stuff and maybe set it in motion, but once it went in motion, then it's just like rolling down the hill with the algorithm based on how it was last pushed, and therefore
Mm.
nature is just like a rolling ball and not necessarily caring who it hits on the way, and creating lots of good and bad stuff as a result, hence the problem of suffering. But then consciousness, if we think how can that actually have an impact on reality? Like, this is one of the questions that got me like 10 years ago, is like, if God really is how people define God, then how can God actually have any impact on reality? Because how can something immaterial have any impact on something material? It's like, you'd imagine God maybe using some sort of hand to have some effect on the material world. But if God is immaterial, then
Mm.
how can something immaterial, like, that's not to say it can't, but it's just more difficult if you really think about it to it like
To
to comprehend.
interface.
Like,
Mm.
how can it? And then you might come to the question, and some Christian mystics, and I'm sure lots of other religions have said that we are all that is God. Like, we, in a way, have the we can channel that consciousness, or we are that consciousness, and therefore we can. But we've also got bodies, and so that we are sort of like God's body on earth, as it were. And so it's up to us whether we're going to turn things around or not, which is an equally scary thing of going back to the thing above. We are alone in terms
Mm.
of we're in control of our fate. Are we, like, this is another thing to add to the existential iceberg, is like, are we doomed to just, is there no free will and we're just doomed to have like whatever fate that we have, or is our choice up to us of how
Yeah,
we
that
turn things around? They're both equally terrifying.
that goes further down. That is further into
Oh,
the
we're getting that.
deterministic view of the
Okay.
world.
I thought it might come up.
Yes. Let's move on to the next one then.
Okay.
Mystery of consciousness. I like this one. And the guy
Yeah.
here looks like
It seems to be devolving.
he's
Seems to be
devolving
going into
somehow. Yeah,
monkeys.
he doesn't seem enlightened for sure.
No, not particularly. Whereas Socrates, we guess
uh,
he has a beard.
I don't know. He seems like he's becoming more and more unhappy,
Yeah, yeah.
and more desperate. I don't know. I don't. He doesn't look in a good state though, for sure.
He doesn't look in a particularly good state.
But mystery of consciousness, I like that because that is because there's so much we don't understand about consciousness.
Yeah. It's the one thing that tripped me up. Like, I was a full-on materialist when I was like 20 years old, doing my philosophy and history
Hmm.
degree. But yeah, doing philosophy classes, full-on materialist. Like, science can eventually explain everything.
Hmm.
And then I got to the theory of mind class, and I was
Hmm.
like, ah, hmm. But actually, consciousness is a bit more like it's the first time I saw something that might actually not be explainable by science.
Exactly, and if you and even from a biology perspective, me thinking about it from a biology perspective, it doesn't actually evolutionary seems to be any benefit for having consciousness. You know,
Mm,
you look at the animal kingdom, there's no consciousness there as such as we define it in our uh, as the human version of consciousness, and nature is operating perfectly fine. There's no other version of consciousness like ours. So even from an evolutionary perspective, it's not advantageous. If anything, having consciousness might mean you might kill yourself. So it's
yeah.
actually a downside for evolutionary advancement and natural selection.
Mm,
So you know, it's a very difficult question. I
yeah.
think.
Yeah. It's not clear. Like, we assume that consciousness arises from matter, but it could be that matter arises from consciousness. And there are two debates in philosophy slash, I guess, even science now. And yeah, it's not clear which one is necessarily the case. Because if you go
Mm,
into quantum physics, then it's far from clear.
oh
Like,
yeah,
because consciousness does seem to be having some sort of impact on, like, the double slit experiment.
we
Uh,
have more of that further down in the
mm,
um, iceberg of existential crisis in terms of quantum physics and its impact on
mm,
things. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting um, mystery, and it's definitely And I can definitely see why it's that far down in the existential crisis iceberg,
And that's
because
like this. It's also the center of our being in terms of behind everything, and the only thing that carries on throughout our lives. You might have memories, obviously, but that carry on, and then you'll be able to remember them in 10 years. But the thing which is always there is the observer of life,
mm,
consciousness, and that's
mm,
in a way is our core identity. That's who we are. But then that consciousness is we don't really know much about it. It's because we're looking out of it. We
mm,
don't know what we're looking out of, and in a way, that consciousness is doesn't have much individuality about it, even though it's coming from this perspective for me and your perspective for you. It's just like consciousness, and so my consciousness
consciousness
is
is
very much like
consciousness.
yours, pretty much. Yeah. So that maybe gives you some sort of either awakening or some sort of existential crisis in terms of consciousness. Like my consciousness is not particularly special compared to yours, or they're
Mm,
both special.
maybe I like that. Um, but it's certainly a difficult concept to grasp, and I don't think we can give any answers as we are
Yeah.
now. And let's go deeper now, one more layer down.
Mm.
Past and future exist simultaneously. And I
Yeah.
think that just talks about how we experience, I suppose, time uh, linearly. But I think there is um, a theory of time that suggests that all moments exist simultaneously,
Yeah,
as
I
far
think
as I
this
was
goes into
studying it.
the block theory universe, like block universe theory. So Einstein suggested, I think, the block universe in terms of trying to remember when I studied it, but yeah, like time and space is like the universe is just for time and space, and yeah, it's not, and also the laws of physics could work backwards
Mm,
equally as well as forwards. I believe that's the case, but probably worth looking into to confirm. So
mm,
yeah, it like and time perhaps is just perhaps time is only experienced from within the block universe. So if you imagine the universe is just like a block, and so time is something we experience as an experiencer looking from it from within the block outwards. But if you imagine, if you use your imagination to look at the universe as a block and to look inwards, then from the position you're looking inwards, if there could be such a position, then there is actually no time, as it were, as past and future. There is past and future, but it's all sort of at once. It's all at the block. It's all on the
mm.
block. So once you go beyond the universe, if you look at the universe, or if you go deep enough into, um, if you zoom in enough with a microscope, theoretically, if you have the super microscope, you can zoom in, and then eventually space time, it seems, breaks down. This seems to be what scientists are finding, that beyond the Planck scale, I believe, is what they call it. Beyond that level of zooming in, that level of magnification, and time and space, at least as we know it, don't exist.
Yeah, and I think that is why it is so far down in the list of the existential crisis, because then you would have a lot of implications about our existence and free will and choices, um,
Yeah,
as we perceive them, at least. And that is why I think it brings us into the super determinism as well, which is the next one.
super
I think which
determinism as opposed to just determinism.
yes,
What makes it so
apparently,
super?
apparently, I think it's I think that goes into more down to the quantum physics side of things. That it
Okay.
suggests that even down to the quantum physics and quantum mechanics can be deterministic, therefore removing all randomness, and therefore um, everything is predetermined in a way.
Mm.
I think it's quite a complex like physics slash quantum mechanics concept that I
Mm.
kind of
Well,
listen to
if
about.
you think
But
of a block universe and then all time is effectively like past and present, from the observer of someone looking at the universe, or imagining the universe, then actually past there is no difference between past and future really, and you could replay well, the laws of physics could work backwards. You could imagine a block universe perhaps as a CD-ROM, or is it well, just a CD? And yeah, so it's you can rewind the CD, and then
Mm.
if there's no like the meaning of past and present isn't that useful when it comes to a CD. Like if you hold up a CD and then you point where like what was before what, like in a way something was before something. One
Mm.
event in the TV show was after another event, but really they're all on the disc.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, I think our concept of time emerges from the way our consciousness works on
Mm.
perceiving things linearly,
So there's
and
autonomy with the
and
consciousness.
yeah, and liking to
Mm.
have things in an organized, linear fashion in our
Well,
brain for it to.
Immanuel Kant, I think, talked about that time and space are how we observe the universe. They're not so much things in the universe. There are methods of observing the universe, and we can't know what is actually there. So time and space, we could say the same of consciousness. Consciousness is our method of observing the universe. Like science
Mm.
is effectively always feeding back into consciousness. So effectively, science is just an extrapolation of the observer looking at something and trying to work out what's there. But yeah, like the idea that time and space are everything, that are either our consciousness or equivalent to our consciousness. Then, if time and space are just how we observe stuff, they're like our goggles, which allow us to see what's there. Then, yeah, we don't know what's behind the goggles, and we also don't know how they're distorting our vision. As well as we're helping it, they can also be distorting it. And just basic science on consciousness in recent years has been suggesting that yeah, we do distort our reality in the attempt to make it understandable.
Mm. And this is why it's so far down in the scale, I think, because it's quite a existential problem to kind of grapple with. I think, as you said, the nature of our consciousness and our perception of time, space, and our reality.
But yeah, you
Um,
can also put it in another very easy to understand way. Is that like how can we have free will in terms of we might think we have free will and we do something, um, and that but actually like that we only may that we've only thought about that decision because someone was telling us or we'd read something about that we don't have free will, and therefore that made us at that moment try and make a free decision which actually wasn't free. And so if you had a really great AI or you had a really good data collector and you could map everything in the inside of the individual and their environment,
you
you
could
could predict.
predict with certain accuracy of
Yeah,
100%
not
probably every
like as a
decision
thought
that someone
experiment,
would make.
it's obviously impossible or probably impossible, but I think that's it's still a good argument to suggest actually, yeah, that
I think
if
no, it's not as impossible. I think AI would become clever enough to know enough about you at
oh
some
yeah,
point and
I
would
think
probably
yeah, they'll know
know
enough,
all your decisions before you make them.
and this is why people think Facebook is tracking them. They may
Mm,
maybe Facebook is tracking them in terms of tracking their conversations, but
mm.
I think it's more likely and perhaps more scary that actually with the relatively limited data Facebook have on us
You could
because
still
they're not actually in our brains, so
no,
they have limited data,
but
but
I
they're
think
still able
it's
to predict what we might want. Like we might predict, oh, this guy wants is going to think about wanting a holiday in this place soon, and then you
of
think about it,
course,
and then you see the ad, so people think, oh, actually,
of
yeah,
course, we're not as complicated as we think we are.
yeah. Well, that's
I
another
th-
thing. Yeah, we like to think we're complicated, but
we're not as complicated as we
in a
think.
way we are, but in a way we're not, which is
We are,
slightly
but we're also very predictable half the
yeah,
times. I think it's human
which is quite humbling.
behavior. Yes, we are complicated, but human behavior can be quite easily predicted, I
Which
think.
maybe suggests that we are, even if we are more complicated, a lot of us are living out of the less complicated personality inside of us. Like maybe you could argue that's the animalistic personality or the
Mm.
desire driven personality. I don't know, but maybe you could say, yeah, there's still hope for us. That we're predictable on one level, but that level doesn't really matter because that's not a level of really living anyway.
No, that's true as well. I agree. Let's move on to the next concept. And that is, oh, this guy has really gone
Oh,
off the
I
rails
wonder
here.
what's going to be the last stage. Well, I
Well,
can
the
actually
last
see a
stage
little bit.
is
I can
yeah,
see a
you can
spoiler.
see
Okay,
he's
it looks like something is happening. Okay, but yeah, okay, we got this guy, and he's got some. Is it red? Is it
he's
his
gotten red
eyes are
eyes
red?
now.
Okay.
He's
Is he
changing into
is
something
he gone
else.
evil, or is he just rubbing his eyes from sorrow?
Maybe he does look unhappy. I don't know if that's anger as well, but he seems like gaunt almost, and maybe
Mm.
he's gone into a cave because he's so unhappy with what he's been experiencing.
Yeah.
But the last one in this level is that human life is a momentarily universal anomaly. That's, I think, we
Okay.
already
Give me a
talked
big
about
word.
this.
Okay. Human life. So, like for instance, as individuals, so like me or you,
I think
or as human
all
life.
of I think all of human life,
Okay, so human life in general, so all humans is a momentarily, so temporary.
human anomaly. Not human, universal anomaly.
So does this mean that like life on Earth or intelligent life on Earth is just a mistake, as it were, or like it just a blip, or just a
Yeah, a
chance,
fluke, a
a
fluke.
fluke?
That this
Yeah.
is just I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the fully automatic model of the universe. You can design a computer simulation even to do the same thing, set up a bunch of rules, click play, and see what happens. And in a long enough span of time, you just have humans that have come up, and it's all meaningless, and there's nothing else. I suppose it's just that, just an anomaly in the simulation.
Mm.
I don't think that that adds any more to what we already discussed. I don't know if
No,
you have.
probably not. I guess you could argue that yeah, like there's even if things are just run on automatic, they're not like quite run on automatic. Well, they are, but it's the laws of physics which are
Mm,
behind the process. Laws of physics, less slash laws of evolution, and you could argue we're a fluke, but you could also argue that we're an inevitability that sooner or later on one planet or another, if that planet's got the conditions for long enough, that advanced life is going to develop, and it would develop in some sort of similar fashion to how we were developed, whatever the conditions of that planet were. We would develop some sort of common attributes because that's just what survives better. But then the question goes back to the alien life.
mm,
Why have we not experienced any other alien life? As far as we know, we're the only ones in the universe. And so
mm.
that might make you doubt that previous argument I gave, but not necessarily, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I just think it undermines our value. I think it's trying to undermine the
Yeah.
value that we have intrinsically if it's just all randomness out of chaos.
Yeah. And people would say we're only can be in this position to analyze stuff because these insane set of chances lined up to create us. But yeah, I'm not wholly convinced by that argument. Yes, that is a good argument, but I don't think it quite solves it.
Hmm. Well, anyway, let's move on to another layer of the.
Are we at the bottom this one?
We are. There's one more.
Oh
There's
wow,
two more
okay.
layers.
Oh wow, okay.
So, this level we're far down under the iceberg now.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so the
What is
brain
that?
creates the flow of time. I think it's
Kind of
the
covered that.
concepts. Yeah, I think we've already covered that in a way with what we talked
Yeah,
about
like Immanuel Kant.
before. Exactly. So the time is a mental construct, um, and our perception creates an illusion, I suppose. So I don't have any more to add on this. It's just the
Yeah,
same.
but then if there's no flow of time, then at least from our comprehension, like how could there be no flow of time? Because how can there just be a now moment? Because the now is not like a set bit in time. What we think of as a present moment is actually just time moving if we really looked into it. Like anything we could imagine, oh, this is the present moment, but actually time is still moving in that. Maybe not. But I think a lot of people think of time as just a flow of present moments, but actually there is no like separate present
And
moments lining up. It
exactly,
is just
it's only
time.
our consciousness creating that these snapshot of moments that we categorize as one after the other in a way.
Mm.
Um,
So yeah, it's
But
very counterintuitive to not believe in time. But my like, there's a book called The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, which is quite a relatively accessible science book. Well, I was able to kind of understand it,
mm,
um, and that sort of undermines the idea of time, at least as far as we know it, as most people act. But also, like a lot of these things that we've been discussing, they
mm.
can sort of melt your brain for a bit, but then you just go back to normal mundane
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
So
of course.
yeah, you can see sort of why people sort of think of philosophy as a little bit useless. But if we really did, um, like if we really did go into this stuff and really maybe not get it on the head level, but at a heart level, then maybe things would actually change, maybe for the worse, but maybe for the better. Like, because it's not like these things we're talking about are not true. It's a lot of these things actually have a duality to them. So it's like probably it's either option A or option
Mm,
B. And both are pretty life changing if we really took them to heart.
mm. And that's why I think it's someone created this list to kind of emphasize, maybe as you said, that there is duality in every one of these concepts. But I like that you're
Mm.
saying also the positive side, or the more utilitarian side, maybe of.
Yeah, I like to keep it positive. I also like I think a lot of people assume a lot of these things are bad, and so I just
Mm.
like to balance it back out.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So let's move on the next one on this level, and
Mm.
we have something that
Oh,
isn't even the guy from above anymore.
okay. Is this supposed to be some sort of evolution, like
I don't know if he's
or
evolved into some kind of creepy dolphin here.
yeah, it is a creepy dolphin. I was going to ask, is that a dolphin?
I don't know. I've seen it before. I've seen these images tend to be the same in those iceberg type of memes. But I don't know why is there a creepy dolphin down here. I don't know if you become a creepy dolphin if you think about these concepts long enough. um,
That's Socrates' next stage.
Maybe, yeah. You go from a hermit, an angry hermit, to an evil dolphin, creepy dolphin. And we have the concept of the Boltzmann brain. I actually found that concept fascinating.
Okay, can you explain?
And the Boltzmann brain concept talks about the fact that if you have a long enough period of time, and obviously you have all the materials in the universe, all the molecules that we have in the universe, inevitably, as molecules come together and apart through the chaos, any kind of structure can be created. Kind of like I don't know if you heard about the philosophical experiment that if you have a bunch of monkeys typing on a computer
Yeah,
for a long enough period of time, out of the randomness, you're going to have the whole works of William Shakespeare.
but
This
then
is
as soon as they keep typing,
They'll be gone. Yes.
yeah, they
But
start destroying it. So are we in the state of are we on the downhill slide?
no, wait.
Okay,
You take this concept and you think that therefore any object could exist given a long enough time, right? It
any
could
option
be
could exist.
any
Okay,
any object,
any
any
object.
any material object. Yes, could
Yeah,
come out spontaneously out of the chaos, whether it's a chair or whatever. But this talks about spontaneously, out of all this chaos, you could have an actual brain with all its memories and all its experiences spontaneously popping out of the chaos.
yeah.
And therefore, we could all be Boltzmann brains that have actually, we're not alive, we're just a brain that has experiences and thinks it's alive, but it's just a brain that has come out of nothingness, and it will probably disintegrate right after a brief moment of existence.
So you're saying it doesn't actually the brain pops out of the chaos, but it seems like it's like a gradual popping out of the chaos, if anything, because it seems like there's all say the chaos is the natural world, the universe, and the material of the universe. And eventually we get to the point where we got Earth and where we got evolution, and eventually we get some humans, and then the brains, lots of humans mate with each other, and we've got lots of
Yep.
brains. So that
Yep.
seems to be how it's popping out, but gradually.
No. You got it wrong. This theory suggests that it's more likely that poof, brain comes up. It's
Okay.
more likely than all of that that you've just described to happen.
Right. Yeah, I could see how that would be the case. Would that mean that it's also very unlikely that I am actually talking to you?
But that could be just
That could be just as likely.
no, but that could be just a memory that you have that you're playing up in
Okay,
your
yeah.
brain, in your spontaneously formed brain. Sit and ponder
Yeah,
that now.
so this ties in with a lot of stuff that we had earlier in terms of you are alone, but in terms of you are alone in your head, like you are just
Yes.
the brain but you've just popped up with all these memories.
Yes.
Okay.
And you're just playing those memories back in your own mind.
And that's
And
kind of more likely.
yeah,
But
and that theory suggests that yeah, it's more likely that molecules will smash together and pop out a fully ready brain with all its memories of your existence and all your life, rather than go through all this process of the universe forming, all of the planets forming, the evolution and everything involved, slowly building up that brain that we have now.
I don't know because I
And we're
think
all just Boltzmann brains floating in space
mm,
before we kind of disappear
well, it's
again.
unlikely we're all. It's probably actually just like one of like for me, it's just me.
Hmm.
And my memory of every interaction with every other theoretical brain was actually just a thought or a memory, and therefore I'm the only one for now. And
Yeah, you're just a
then I'll
floating
go
brain
out of
in
existence,
space.
and then someone else will probably pop up into existence as well sometime. But yeah, I don't know. Like always, probability stuff. I think
Yeah,
is it's not very
it's a
helpful
bit
because it's so beyond us.
it's I know it's so beyond us and so crazy, but I really found that that crazy concept. I had never heard of it, and I found it such a crazy concept. But
Yeah.
it's such a funny idea to think about in a way. It reminds me of a little bit, you know, have you watched the Gardens of the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Do you know the father, the planet, who was the father of Star Lord?
Hmm.
When he talks about his backstory, they visualize it as just a brain on space in
Right.
space,
So does he create something? Does he create the universe, or what does he create?
and then that brain creates that planet around him,
Oh, okay.
and then he becomes like a godlike figure. But yeah, he was visualized as a brain, and that after I heard about this concept of Boltzmann brain, it reminded me of that,
Hmm.
of how they visualized him, that he was just a brain floating in space and then created his own world around him. So yeah, I just something to add to the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just found that concept
But
fascinating.
but
From
but
all
it
of these, hmm?
it ties in with the previous a lot of previous stuff in
it,
terms
it
of the
it does,
distinction between consciousness or the relation between consciousness and matter, and
yeah,
matter being the observable world, what we think is there, or maybe it's not there. But yeah, like there does seem to be still that duality between consciousness and the observable world. Maybe maybe that's interesting to go into, or maybe actually maybe there's no duality, and actually this is why we've got so many issues because we think of everything in terms of a duality between consciousness and matter.
maybe, maybe. And now we are finally in the last layer,
Quantum immortality. Okay.
and here we have quantum immortality. So this was explained in the video I watched a little bit, and it talks about um, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and kind of like how Schrodinger's cat in can be alive and dead, you know,
Mm.
if until you look, for example, and if we are talking about quantum immortality, then the theory says that in some reality you will always survive, you always be alive. There's always going to be a reality where you die, and therefore there's always a reality that always survives, and that is the reality that you live in. If that makes
Okay.
sense, it's very difficult to kind of
So basically, in one universe or another, we're all Brian Johnson, and therefore we'll all live for a long time.
yeah, in a way, yes. The way I was kind of visualizing was that in some kind of version of, let's say, of the world, of one reality, let's say, you'll always um, die by an accident, let's say, or something else, but there is always another reality where you don't die by that accident or that other factor, and
Mm.
therefore, from your perspective, from what it says, you'll always be living into that world where you're alive.
Oh, well, you leave into that other
No,
world.
not yeah. Your consciousness goes into that in a way,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you always survive in
But-
that.
So you wouldn't say that there's individual yous and they're effectively just individual consciousnesses.
Probably not. Probably they're all the same.
Mm. Yeah, I think
I
I did hear something about that recently, and I can't put it. I can't
it's
explain it
very
again.
difficult
But
for me. It's very hard to even like visualize or kind of accurately describe in a way, because it kind of ties with the last one as well, which is you cannot die from your perspective, which is effectively what we were saying in there, that you'll always be alive from your perspective into these split realities, let's say, of
yeah,
of
interesting.
of
And
the
so you
world,
just got the
and then
eternal.
you're in the
Oh, that,
enlightened state
that's
here.
enlightenment. Okay, so you got eternal life, but maybe not in the way you imagined. Mm.
Yes, that it was very difficult. Even hearing Alex O'Connor describe it was a bit difficult to comprehend. Um, but they kind of say that you'll always be effectively, your conscious experience will always be alive in one way because of that
Mm.
um, quantum physics and quantum mechanics
Yeah,
hypothesis
that
of the
seems to
many
rely on
worlds.
sort of a distinction between consciousness and matter again, and so that we might be part of one material universe, and then our consciousness dies in that universe, but it goes on to the next universe or joins the one in the next universe, or I don't
Hmm.
know. Yeah, it does seem to imply that the consciousness is not linked to the material universe and hence can survive it when
I think it's not like, I don't know. I kind of need to kind of visualize these things in kind of like a thought experiment for me to kind of understand them, and I kind of think of it. How would that feel if that was happening? And I was thinking you couldn't really feel it because you died. So if we're to take that kind of interpretation, it would mean that you never experienced your death, I suppose, and therefore the thing that killed you never actually even happened because you're just following the branch of reality that you're alive still, and you'll always be alive whether you're, but then I don't know how that translates when you're in your deathbed. Do you suddenly get given the cure and you suddenly live forever? I don't know. It's
well,
kind of,
yeah, presumably with that sort of thought experiment, it's certain that actually there would be a universe where you're living in which allows you to live longer. Like it, even
yeah.
however unlikely it is, because you got all these universes of possibility with different possibilities, there
Mhm.
will be a universe with a possibility that you find some sort of cure for whatever problem was stopping you living longer, and so you just go into that universe.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
it,
not very convinced by this, but maybe it's because I've not studied it enough. It did
Me
come up.
neither. My quantum physics and quantum mechanics knowledge is quite limited, but I find it all fascinating, and I am, some concepts are more entertaining than others, but I think some of them are more like a thought exercise rather than anything else. And some of these ideas can I hope can make some people more curious or more interested in learning more about the nature of reality and the world. And I think it's worth hearing other people's opinions on this. If anyone has any strong opinions about any of the concepts we discussed today, um, and I don't know if you have any other final thoughts, John, because I think we've went quite overtime again today.
It's a long one, but yeah, like just what comes to mind is thinking whether like all this philosophizing in a way is like fun, but also like does is that philosophizing? If you really take it seriously, you really comprehend some of those concepts, and you really think this is probably the most reasonable layout of reality. Do you need to do that philosophizing to then enjoy reality and to enjoy yourself. Because I think a big part of the meaning of existence is to be able to enjoy it in whatever way you
Mm.
describe it. And I'm not sure you need to do all this philosophizing. Maybe it helps, but maybe for adults you need to do it. But for kids, kids don't need to have all this
Mm.
philosophizing. Although
But I
some
think it
kids do it.
varies. But I
But
think it
some,
varies from person to person, to be honest. I
mm,
think some people need more answers than others to be convinced finally. Or not convinced, convinced is the wrong word, but to settle their minds, let's say, and enjoy themselves in a way. But that is why I'm
mm.
curious to see if anyone who's watched our video or will watch our video, if they have any answers or questions they have, and I'd be very curious to hear about them under the video. Well, I think we can close up there, and thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week with another episode of Going Nowhere.